German Shepherd gave her puppy to a man and started crying. Then he did something incredible. The cold wind howled across the deserted Wyoming highway, whipping dust and mud into a gritty haze as Luna trudged through the night, her once shiny German Shepherd coat dulled to a weary gray. Between her jaws she carried Soul, her fragile puppy, a trembling bundle of matted fur, his tiny body shivering against the chill. Her amber eyes, glassy with exhaustion, darted through the dark, desperation burning in their depths as cars roared past, their headlights slicing the void, blind to her fading strength. Miles of cracked asphalt stretched behind her, bloodied paws leaving faint prints. But ahead, a flicker of hope gleamed. Who could save a mother surrendering her last light? Luna's legs quaked, each step a battle against collapse, her ribs stark beneath her thinning frame. A testament to days without food, nights without rest. Saul whimpered, a faint chirp barely audible over the wind, and her heart clenched. Her only pup, born in a ditch. The others lost to the wild's cruel grip. She'd carried him through dust storms, past rusted signs, driven by a mother's resolve to find refuge. Now near breaking, a gas station's dim glow pierced the dark. Miguel Torres, a rugged man in a thick jacket, slamming his truck door, keys jangling in the frigid air. Her breath rasped, a cloud in the cold as she summoned a final burst, paws scraping, muscles screaming, to reach him. Miguel turned, his weathered face creasing at the sight. A gaunt shepherd staggering toward him, her amber eyes locking on his with a plea that stopped him cold. She knelt, trembling, and gently placed Soul at his feet, the puppy's tiny form shivering on the cracked pavement. Then with a shudder, she cried, a haunting, pleading whimper that cut through the wind, a sound so raw it froze Miguel's hand mid-reach. "Whoa," he breathed, dropping to one knee, his thick jacket rustling as he touched Soul's frail warmth, barely a pulse beneath the matted fur. Luna's glassy gaze met his, her ribs stark, paws bloodied, a mother's surrender etched in every quiver. She stepped back, turning to leave, a shadow fading into dust. But Miguel's voice cracked the silence. "Wait!" He scooped Soul up, wrapping him in his jacket, the puppy's faint chirp a knife to his chest. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly, his rugged hands steady despite the tremble in his words. Luna paused, torn, her ears twitching, her amber eyes flickering between Soul and the dark she'd come from. Miguel's breath held, his heart breaking as she wavered, a mother's instinct warring with collapse. "Come on," he urged, his voice a gentle tether, opening the truck door wide. "Let's go home." She hesitated, then leapt, her bloodied paws landing soft, curling beside Soul on the seat, her head resting on the bundle as if guarding a fading flame. Miguel climbed in, the engine roaring to life, and the highway faded. A lifeline forged in a cry, a bond born from dust. The truck rumbled through the night, Soul's tiny form nestled in Miguel's jacket, Luna's amber eyes glinting in the dashboard's glow, a quiet trust flickering beneath her exhaustion. Miguel's hands gripped the wheel, his rugged face tight with resolve. He'd seen strays, patched wounds, but this was different, a plea he couldn't turn from. "Hang on, little ones," he muttered, his voice a gravelly thread, glancing at Luna's quivering frame. "You're safe now." The cabin loomed ahead, a weathered haven tucked against the pines, its porch a silhouette in the dark. Miguel carried Soul inside, Luna trailing slow, her paws scraping the threshold. Resigned to rejection, her glassy gaze darting. He knelt by the sofa, building a nest of blankets, his thick jacket a cradle for the puppy's faint warmth. "Here," he said, setting Soul down, then fetched a bowl, water first, then scraps of jerky from his pack. Luna's eyes widened, a flicker of hunger breaking her wariness, and she ate, cautious, slow, her amber gaze never leaving her pup. By dawn, the cabin glowed soft. Luna curled beside Soul, her black coat a shield, her breathing deep with a trust she hadn't dared before. Miguel watched, his rugged hands still, his heart swelling. A mother who'd lost everything, a pup clinging to life, and a man who'd found them in the dust. "You're home," he whispered, a promise stitched into the silence. A bond begun with a cry, a tale just starting to unfold. The faint glow of dawn crept through the cabin's windows, casting soft shadows across the worn sofa where Luna lay, curled, her black coat a protective shield around Sewell. The fragile puppy nestled deep in Miguel Torres's jacket. Her amber eyes fluttered half open, exhaustion etching every line of her gaunt frame, but her ears twitched at the creak of floorboards. Miguel stepping from the kitchen, his rugged hands cradling a bowl of water and a plate of scrambled eggs. The scent hit her, a flicker of hunger sparking beneath her wariness, and she lifted her head, a low chirp escaping as Sewell stirred, his tiny form trembling against her warmth. Could this stranger's kindness hold after a night of dust and despair? Miguel knelt beside the sofa, his thick jacket shed, his voice a gentle murmur. "Easy, girl," he said, setting the bowl close, the water rippling in the quiet. "You need this, both of you." Luna's glassy gaze met his, her ribs stark beneath her dulled fur, paws bloodied from a journey she'd barely survived. She sniffed the water, hesitation trembling in her stance, resigned to rejection, braced for the door. But Miguel's hand stayed still, his rugged face soft, with a patience she hadn't known. "Go on," he urged, sliding the eggs nearer, their warmth a whisper of care. Her tongue flicked out, cautious at first, lapping the water slow, a ripple of trust breaking her guard. Sewell chirped, a faint squeak, and she shifted, nudging him closer, her amber eyes darting between the pup and the man. Miguel's breath held, his heart thudding as she took a bite. Eggs disappearing in tentative gulps, her hunger a quiet roar. "Good girl," he murmured, his voice a tether, and Luna's tail twitched. A flicker of something new. A spark in the dark she'd carried too long. The cabin hummed, wood crackling in the hearth, wind rattling the pines, as Miguel watched them settle, Sewell's tiny paws pressing her side, Luna's breathing easing into sleep. He rose, his boots scuffing the floor, and fetched a towel, damp with warm water, to clean her bloodied paws. She flinched, a chirp of protest, but his hands moved slow, tender over torn pads, and her amber eyes softened, a trust blooming frail but real. "You've been through hell," he said, his voice thick, wrapping Sewell tighter in the jacket. "Not anymore." Morning stretched, the cabin a cocoon of quiet care, but Sewell's whimpers grew, sharp, weak, a thread of life fraying fast. Miguel's gut twisted, his rugged hands trembling as he lifted the pup, feeling the faint warmth flicker. "Hang on, little guy," he whispered, his breath fogging in the chill. Luna's eyes snapped open, her chirp urgent as she rose. Ribs stark, strength fading, but she pressed close, her nose brushing Sewell's matted fur, a mother's plea in her glassy stare. "We need help," Miguel said, his voice firm as he grabbed his keys, bundling Sewell in a blanket. "Vet's close. I'll bring him back." Luna's ears pinned, her body rigid with fear, but he knelt, his hand steady on her head. "You're coming too. I'm not leaving you." She hesitated, then leapt, her bloodied paws landing soft in the truck, curling beside Sewell on the seat, her amber eyes locked on Miguel. A trust tethered to his promise. The vet's office loomed, a squat building off the highway, its sign weathered but warm. Miguel carried Sewell inside, Luna trailing close, her steps faltering as the door swung shut. Dr. Clara Evans met them, her steady hands glinting with tools, her voice calm but sharp. "What have we got?" Miguel's words tumbled fast, his rugged face tight. "Found him last night, highway strays. She's starved, he's fading, cold, weak, barely moving." Clara's gaze flicked to Luna, her ribs stark, then Sewell, her fingers probing his frail warmth. "He's critical, malnutrition, hypothermia, chance with care, but it's tight." Luna's chirp broke, low, mournful, as Clara whisked Sewell to a table, oxygen hissing, a heater humming to life. Miguel's hand found her fur, his voice a gravelly thread. "He's fighting, girl. Stay with me." Her amber eyes glistened, her body trembling as she pressed close, a mother's fear clawing her chest. Clara's hands moved deft, fluids dripping, warmth wrapping Sewell's tiny form, and after agonizing minutes, a faint squeak pierced the quiet. He's holding, she said, her voice lifting. Tough little guy. Needs time. Miguel's breath eased, his rugged hands steady as he knelt by Luna. He's alive. Hear that? Her chirp softened, her nose brushing his arm, a truss stitched tighter in the vet's glow. Clara's gaze softened, her steady hands pausing. She's a wreck, starved, torn up. Feed her slow. Meat, water. I'll keep him till he's stable. Day or two. Miguel's gut twisted, his voice firm. She's not leaving him. I'm not either. Clara nodded, her grin faint. Fair. Stay close. She's his anchor. The clinic stretched into dusk. Soul in a crate, tubes threading life. Luna curled beside it, her amber eyes locked on her pup. Miguel sat by, his thick jacket a shield, his hands offering jerky scraps, her hunger easing, her trust deepening with each bite. Good girl, he murmured, his voice a lifeline, and she nuzzled Soul's crate, a chirp of hope breaking her silence. Clara checked in, her steady hands lifting Soul's chart. He's warming, hearts up, she's helping, keep her near. Night fell, the clinic a cocoon of quiet care. Saul's squeaks growing, Luna's wariness fading, Miguel's rugged frame a steady rock. You're tough, girl, he said, his hand resting on her head, her amber eyes glinting with a spark reborn. We'll get him back, promise. She huffed a soft rumble, her trust a thread weaving them close. A bond born in dust, now glowing in the cabin's echo, a tale of sacrifice stretching toward light. The vet clinic's soft hum filled the air as dawn broke over Wyoming, casting a gentle glow through the window where Luna lay curled beside Soul's crate, her black fur a steadfast shield against the sterile chill. Her amber eyes flickered with a wary hope, fixed on her fragile puppy. His tiny chest rising steadier now, the oxygen tube a fading lifeline as warmth seeped into his matted coat. Miguel Torres sat close, his rugged hands resting on his knees, his thick jacket draped over the chair. A quiet sentinel who'd stayed through the night. Soul squeaked, a faint but growing sound, and Luna's ears twitched, her chirp soft with relief. Could this stranger's promise hold true? A spark of life rekindled from the dust? Dr. Clara Evans stepped in, her steady hands cradling a clipboard, her voice calm but warm. He's stabilizing. Heart's up. Temp's climbing, she said, peering into the crate. Tough little guy. Give him a day. He's yours. Miguel's breath eased, his rugged face softening as he glanced at Luna. Hear that, girl? He's coming back. Her glassy gaze met his, a flicker of trust breaking through her exhaustion, and she nuzzled the crate, her nose brushing Soul's tiny form. A mother's faith stitched anew. The clinic stretched through the morning, Clara's hands deft as she eased Soul from oxygen, his squeaks bold enough for milk. He's ready, she said, passing a dropper to Miguel, her steady gaze lifting. Slow, let him take it. Miguel's fingers trembled, his voice a gravelly thread as he knelt by Luna. Here, little fighter, he murmured, dripping formula into Soul's mouth, the puppy's tongue flicking tentative but sure. Luna's chirp rose, a soft, urgent song, her amber eyes glinting as she watched, her wariness fading with each drop. Hours blurred, Soul's crate a cocoon of care, Luna's bulk a steady anchor, Miguel's hands a bridge between them. He's gaining, Clara said at noon, her clipboard scribbled with hope. Half an ounce, good sign. Miguel's grin cracked, his rugged face alight as he ruffled Luna's ears. Good girl, you kept him going. Her tail twitched, a faint wag breaking her guard, a trust blooming tender and real, her glassy gaze softening into something warm. By dusk, Soul's squeaks grew, his tiny paws pushing, his eyes cracking open, milky blue but alive. He's yours, Clara said, her steady hands lifting him from the crate, passing him to Miguel. Feed him slow, meat for her. They're fighters, both of them. Luna rose, her bloodied paws trembling, her chirp a plea as Miguel cradled Soul, his warmth a lifeline against her chest. Let's go home, he said, his voice firm with promise, and she leapt, her steps faltering but sure, curling beside Soul in the truck, her amber eyes locked on Miguel. A bond tethered tight. The cabin glowed warm as Miguel pushed the door open, Luna trailing close, her nose brushing Soul's fur. A mother's vigil unbroken. He knelt by the sofa, rebuilding the nest, blankets soft, his jacket a cradle, and set Soul down, his tiny form shivering less, his squeaks bold with life. Here, he murmured, offering Luna jerky scraps, her hunger sparking as she ate, cautious, slow, her trust a flicker growing steady. She curled beside Soul, her black coat a shield, her breathing deep, a peace she'd never dared. Days unfolded, Saul's strength blooming, his wobbly steps a dance on the cabin floor, his squeaks a chorus of light. Miguel's hands moved gentle, milk bottles swapped for meat mash, his voice a steady hum as he fed the pup. Luna watching with amber eyes now clear of fear. "Look at you, little guy," he said, his grin cracking as Soul nipped his finger, a playful spark breaking the dark. Luna's chirp answered, her tail wagging, a truss stitched firm, her wariness fading into warmth. The cabin hummed, wood crackling, wind whispering through the pines, as Luna's ribs softened, her dulled coat gleaming anew with each meal Miguel offered. "Good girl," he'd murmur, his rugged hands steady as he brushed her fur, her bloodied paws healing under his care. She'd nuzzle Soul, her nose brushing his tiny form, a mother's love a quiet fire, her strength reborn in the stranger's glow. Miguel watched, his heart swelling, a bond woven through dust and despair, now a family taking root. Weeks stretched, summer's green fading to fall's gold, and Soul grew, his legs steady, his coat a tapestry of black and tan, his amber eyes glinting with life. "He's a fighter," Miguel said one morning, his voice thick as Soul bounded across the floor, pouncing a sock with a squeak of glee. Luna rose, her steps sure, her chirp a melody of pride as she guided him, a mother's touch unbroken by the wild she'd left. Miguel's hands rested on her head, his grin soft. "You're tough, girl. Saved him." The cabin's quiet deepened. Soul's play a chorus, Luna's trust a steady hum, Miguel's rugged frame a rock they leaned on. "You're Luna," he said one evening, his voice a gravelly thread as she sprawled by the hearth, her amber eyes glinting. "Strong as the moon," she chirped, her head tilting, and he knelt by Soul, ruffling his fur. "And you're Soul, my little light," the puppy squeaked, nipping his hand, a bond forged in a cry, now glowing in the cabin's peace. Fall's crisp bite settled, the cabin a haven, Luna's wariness a memory, her trust a flame that warmed them all. "You're home," Miguel murmured, his hands steady as he watched them sleep. Soul curled against Luna's side, a family born from a mother's plea, a tale of sacrifice stitched into their quiet nights. The soft crackle of the hearth filled Miguel Torres's cabin as autumn's golden glow spilled through the windows, bathing the Wyoming haven in a warm embrace. Luna sprawled across the rug, her black coat gleaming anew, her amber eyes half closed in a peace she'd never known, her once bloodied paws now healed, curled protectively around Soul. The puppy, a bundle of black and tan fur, tumbled beside her, his tiny paws swatting at a sock with playful squeaks, his amber eyes glinting with a spark that had grown from a flicker to a flame. Miguel sat in his chair, his rugged hands resting on his knees, a quiet grin tugging his lips as he watched them. A family stitched from dust and trust, blooming in the cabin's glow. Soul's wobbly steps had steadied, his legs stretching with each day, his chirps a lively chorus that broke the silence Luna had carried too long. "Look at you, little light," Miguel murmured, his voice a gravelly thread as he tossed a rag, Soul pouncing with a squeak of glee. Luna's ears twitched, her chirp soft with pride as she rose, her frame fuller now, her ribs softened by jerky and scraps. Nudging Soul back with a gentle paw, her amber eyes glinting with a mother's care. "Good girl," Miguel said, his hand brushing her head, her trust a steady hum beneath his touch. The cabin hummed, wind whispering through the pines, wood popping in the fire. As Luna's wariness faded, her glassy gaze now clear, with a warmth that mirrored Soul's playful spark. Miguel's hands moved tender, meat mashed for the pup, water poured for her, his rugged face softening with each chirp and nuzzle. "You're strong, Luna," he said one evening, his thick jacket shed as he knelt by her side, her nose brushing his palm. A trust forged in a cry, now a bond she dared to claim. Soul squeaked, nipping his finger, and Miguel's grin cracked wide, a light breaking through his own quiet dark. Weeks unfolded, Soul's coat thickening, his play a dance across the floor, Luna's steps a steady rhythm beside him. "He's growing fast," Miguel said one crisp morning, his voice thick as Soul bounded to the door, his tiny tail wagging with a vigor that echoed her own. Luna chirped, her amber eyes glinting as she followed. A mother's pride stitched into every glance, her strength reborn in the cabin's peace. Miguel's hands steadied a bowl, his grin soft. "You've got a fighter, girl. Saved him good." The porch became their haven, Soul tumbling in the dust. Luna sprawled close, her trust a quiet fire as Miguel sat beside them, his rugged frame a rock they leaned on. "You're Luna," he'd said, naming her for the moon's strength, and Soul, for the light she'd carried through despair. Her ears flicked, a chirp breaking free as she nuzzled Soul, a bond woven tight, a family forged from a mother's plea. "Good boy," he murmured, ruffling Soul's fur, and Luna's tail wagged, a flicker growing bold, her wariness a memory eclipsed by warmth. Fall deepened, the pines shedding gold, and the cabin's quiet grew. Soul's chirps a chorus, Luna's trust a steady hum, Miguel's hands a bridge between them. "You're home," he said one night, his voice a gravelly thread as Luna rested her head on his hand, her amber eyes glinting with a peace she'd never dared. Soul curled beside her, his tiny form a testament to her fight, a bond born in dust, now glowing in the cabin's embrace. Miguel's heart swelled, his rugged face soft. A man who'd walked alone, now tethered to two souls who'd found him in the dark. Winter's chill crept in, the cabin a cocoon, Luna's coat a shield, Soul's play a spark that warmed them all. "You've changed me," Miguel murmured, his hands steady as he watched them sleep. Soul's tiny paws twitching, Luna's breathing deep, a family stitched from a cry, a tale of sacrifice, now a quiet miracle. "Good girl," he whispered, his voice thick, and Luna's ears flicked. A trust unbroken, a bond that held them close. The crisp Wyoming winter settled over Miguel Torres's cabin, frost tracing delicate patterns on the windows as the hearth's glow danced across the worn rug. Luna sprawled by the fire, her black coat a warm cradle for Soul, now a sturdy young German shepherd, his tan and black fur shimmering as he gnawed a bone with playful vigor. His amber eyes glinted with a spark that had grown from a fragile flicker, his paws steady on the floorboards, a light born from dust, nurtured by a mother's cry in a stranger's hand. Miguel sat close, his rugged frame softened by time, his silver-streaked hair catching the firelight as he watched them. A family forged in a storm, now a quiet miracle etched in every glance. Soul's chirps had deepened to barks, his tiny form stretching into a lean strength that mirrored Luna's, her amber eyes glinting with pride as she nudged him, her once wary gaze now a steady warmth. "You're a fighter, little light," Miguel murmured, his voice a gravelly thread as he tossed a rag, Soul bounding after it with a bark of glee. Luna's chirp answered, her tail wagging, a trust woven tight through months of care, her strength a beacon that had guided them home. "Good girl," he said, his thick hands steady as he ruffled her ears, her nuzzle a soft reply, a bond unbroken by the wild she'd left. The cabin hummed, wind whispering through the pines, wood popping in the hearth. As Luna's past faded, her ribs a memory beneath a coat now thick with life. Miguel's hands moved gentle, meat scraps for Soul, water for her, his rugged face a map of lines carved by quiet nights and tender days. "You've changed me," he said one evening, his voice thick as Luna rested her head on his knee, Soul curling beside her, a family stitched from a cry, now a haven of peace. "You're my shadow," he whispered, his grin cracking. "Always will be." Winter stretched into spring, Soul's play a chorus across the porch, Luna's steps a steady rhythm, Miguel's thick jacket shed as he joined them, his rugged hands tossing sticks for Soul to chase. "Look at you, boy," he chuckled, his voice lifting as the young shepherd leapt, amber eyes bright with a vigor that echoed her own. Luna chirped, her tail wagging, bold, a mother's pride unbroken, her trust a flame that warmed them all. "Good girl," he said, his hand steady on her head. "You gave him this." Years unfolded, the cabin a sanctuary, Soul growing tall, his coat a mirror of Luna's strength. Luna's amber eyes dimming with age but steady with peace. At 35, Miguel's hair whitened, his steps slowed, but his heart burned bright. Luna and Soul by his side, their barks a song that filled the quiet. "You're my family," he'd murmur, his voice a gravelly thread as they slept by his bed. Saul's muzzle graying, Luna's breathing soft. A bond forged in a storm, now a light that never faded. Fall returned, the pines shedding gold, the cabin's quiet deepening as Luna's steps faltered, her coat silvering at the edges. "You've been strong, girl," Miguel said one dusk, his thick hands trembling as he knelt by her side, her amber eyes glinting faint but sure. Soul nuzzled her, his bark a soft plea, a son's love echoing her own. "Good boy," she seemed to chirp, her head resting on Miguel's hand. A trust unbroken by time, a farewell stitched in silence. Winter's chill came. Luna's breath fading, her body still as she curled beside Soul, her amber eyes closing in peace. Miguel wept, his rugged hands steady as he buried her beneath the pines, her bloodied paws a memory, her strength a whisper in the wind. "Good girl," he rasped, tears streaking his weathered face, Soul's mournful howl piercing the dusk, a bond forged in dust, now etched in the wild's embrace. Years stretched, Soul aging, his muzzle whitening, his amber eyes glinting with Luna's spark. Miguel's rugged frame bending with time. At 40, he sat on the porch, his cane a companion, Soul sprawled close, a family tempered by loss, now a quiet fire. "You're my light," he murmured, his voice thick as Soul nuzzled his hand, a bark fading to a huff. A bond unbroken by death, a tale whispered in the pines. Spring bloomed, the cabin quiet, Soul gone in peace beside Luna's grave. Miguel's steps slow as he tended their memory. The highway stretched silent, its dust a shadow snuffed by a mother's cry. Luna, the weary shepherd who'd carried her pup to him, Soul, the light she left behind. "You saved me," he whispered, his rugged hands tracing their names on a plank. A bond forged in a storm, now immortal in his heart. The village heard their tale, kids whispering of a dog's plea, a man's care, Miguel's porch, a beacon of a miracle stitched from dust. "They're with me," he'd say, his grin cracking as he sat alone, the wind carrying their chirps, a legacy of sacrifice and hope, a family forever in the quiet. Wyoming's pines sang their story, a mother, her pup, and a man who'd found them in the dark, a bond that proved love could bloom from despair, a whisper of trust that echoed beyond the wild.